Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
If she is listening now, I want to tell her that we love her, we miss her, and nothing will ever fill the void that she left when she was so brutally and suddenly torn from us. But we hope that she can find a modicum of peace now.
The family of a young girl murdered in Burnaby more than 6 years ago thanks prosecutors and slams the defense after a man is convicted in her death. Plus,
cost of inflation and the instability in the housing market and food instability as well.
Rising costs are hurting pets and pet owners. How you may be able to help. And
Merry Christmas, BC children! Look at you. How are you doing? Are you giving out high fives?
spreading some cheer everywhere. Santa drops by BC Children's Hospital to brighten the day for patients, parents, and staff.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. For the first time, the family of a 13-year-old Burnaby girl who was killed 6 years ago is speaking publicly. Last week, Ibrahim Ali was found guilty of first-degree murder in the teenager's death. Our John Hernandez joins us live from BC Supreme Court in Vancouver. John, first of all, what did the family share today?
Yeah, the victim's brother made an emotional statement outside the courthouse today. We're not naming him due to a publication ban protecting the victim's identity, but we had heard throughout the course of the trial that he was texting with her on the day that she died. Here's how he looked back on those final moments communicating with his sister.
I was working and studying in China at the time, having just messaged her hours before the incident, not knowing that those were going to be my last words to her. And this is something that's going to haunt me daily and will probably continue to do so till my dying days.
Now, we do know after those text exchanges between the victim and her brother, the victim was found, her body was found rather, in Burnaby Central Park. Prosecutors said she was passing through when she was sexually assaulted and strangled to death. On Friday, Ibrahim Ali was found guilty of first-degree murder. The victim's brother said he was grateful and relieved by the verdict. However, he did have some critical words for the defense.
The hurt that this defense has caused on our family is immeasurable. So I don't think it's unfair to say on behalf of my entire family that we resent and despise the defense for the way that they have chose to act, all of which that was funded by taxpayer money, and we will be filing formal complaints through the proper channels to see them disbarred.
Now, CBC News did speak with defense lawyer Ben Linsky as the victim's brother was making his statement outside the courthouse. The defense lawyer said while he felt for the family and acknowledged that these trials can be traumatizing, he did stand by the role the defense plays in a trial like this. He said, first and foremost, it's the defense's job to represent the accused, to ensure that true justice is had and that there are no wrongful convictions.
John, we've also heard that police have arrested a man who allegedly brought a gun into the courthouse on Friday when that verdict was handed down. What's the latest we've heard on that, and do we know who this is?
Yeah, the Vancouver Police Department said they had received reports that someone entered the courtroom carrying a weapon on Friday, and we did speak with Ben Linsky today. He said that person was the victim's father. They had, defense lawyers had been receiving threats throughout the trial, and so knowing that someone may have been in the courtroom with a weapon was particularly distressing for them.
I think anytime there's significant animus, anytime there's a person with a gun, that's deeply concerning.
So the court proceedings today were moved into a secure courtroom. The VPD says that suspect has been released and further investigation is ongoing at the moment. As for what's next here, a sentencing hearing has been scheduled for January, and the defense has filed a notice of appeal. Among the charges listed in it are that there are third-party suspects in the girl's death. Dan.
John Hernandez reporting live from BC Supreme Court in Vancouver. John, thanks very much. The RCMP in Williams Lake says 2 people have been arrested after a man brought a dead infant to a local hospital on Friday. Police say a second child was later found hurt nearby and also brought to hospital to get checked. They say a 32-year-old man and a 33-year-old woman were arrested, but they did not specify their relationship to the children, if any. The pair have since been released. Mounties say the Ministry of Children and Family Development has been told and has launched its own investigation. The BC Coroner Service is also looking into what happened. The City of Vancouver has now passed its $2 billion budget. That includes a 7.5% property tax hike and is similar to the draft budget revealed last month. But as Justin McElroy reports, it also includes a last-second increase to the mayor's budget.
The mayor of Vancouver has increased the budget to his specific office. And not surprisingly, he thinks it's a good idea.
Let's be bold. Vancouver's a world-class city. Let's act world-class.
Ken Sim said that in order to act world-class, the mayor needs to travel to more events and meet with more people to bring the city more events and contracts. So during the city's budget debate, he asked for more money. $100,000 for his office and $80,000 for the clerk's office, explicitly to help support the mayor's office. And the amendment passed. That's 2023 Ken Sim. But 2022 Ken Sim had different thoughts about the mayor's budget.
First of all, I want to be very clear. We are not going to be cutting any service levels. The dump spend comes in terms of, fun fact for you, what do every single president and every single prime minister have in common of Canada? They've only had one chief of staff. The mayor here had 2. So there's 150 grand right there.
That was at a Business in Vancouver debate when Sim was asked where he would find the budget efficiencies he kept campaigning on. But that wasn't just a one-time line. 3 days later, we interviewed Sim and asked him the same question. And he said the same thing.
When every single president of the United States and every single prime minister of Canada have gotten by with one chief of staff, and then we have the city of Vancouver that needs 2 chiefs of staff under the current mayor, that's an issue.
Sim did go down to 1 chief of staff, but the budget didn't actually go down. The money was just redistributed in the mayor's office in a different way. And now it's going up by about 10%. Now, is that a lot? It depends on how you look at it. Here is a chart. This is where Vancouver sat a couple years ago compared to some other big municipalities. The increases will keep the city in the middle. So you can say it's just the cost of doing more business with more people, as the mayor did.
If we can't get the results, I will personally hold myself accountable.
Or you could use it as an example of how what you say in a campaign and what you do as a mayor can often be a little bit different. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
We have been seeing visits to food banks soar across BC this year, but the SPCA says the demand for more help for pet food banks is also growing. The not-for-profit says it relies on donations and on its own funds to meet the demand. Last year, the society provided more than 530,000 meals for dogs and cats. This year, though, the need has gone up by 20%.
And that could be due to climate crises and emergencies like fires and floods that we saw in 2021. The fires last year had a huge impact, as well as the cost of inflation and the instability in the housing market and food instability as well, or insecurity, I should say. So there's been quite a need.
The society says that it cannot keep up with the demand, especially for dry cat and dog food. Waters says if you want to make a donation, you can drop it off at any of their 36 locations. A recycling facility in Kamloops is shutting its doors, claiming its business is being underfunded by Recycle BC. The CBC's Jennifer Norwell spoke to staff about why too much recycling is actually causing the problem.
So tell me a little bit about why you're getting out of the business of recycling.
We are receiving too much volume. We are getting back too much recycle, and it is affecting parts of my business that pay the wages around here. The main problem, it is affecting the ability of customers to bring me product that I can pay my bills with. I often get vehicles and cars on my parking lot for 15 or 20 minutes that are returning only recyclables. That's maybe a $2 value to me, whereas the same person with 20 minutes worth of bottles is worth 20 times that. Over the course of last summer, the volumes became so large that it was causing a lot of problems for people to get in and out of here.
This is one of the situations where people are using this to get rid of their soft plastics, styrofoam, their glass. Is there a concern that without an option on the North Shore, that might end up going into garbages?
Yeah, there very well could be an opportunity, because it's less convenient now than it has been in the past, to see more of that product, the soft plastic, glass, styrofoam, showing up in our garbage mix rather than going to the depot where it ultimately should be going.
Is there anything that the city can do about it? I know it's not the city's purview to decide how recycling works.
Yeah, ultimately, as it relates to Recycle BC depots, that's a decision made by that organization, and it's really out of the control of the city of Kamloops.
Due to business decisions, General Grant's North Shore Recycling Center is no longer going to be accepting Recycle BC residential packaging and paper materials. We are asking residents to drop off their packaging and paper materials at 2 depots that are nearby, both of which are about a 6-kilometer drive away.
I know just anecdotally in chatting with some folks, their response to this was, well, I'll just end up throwing it in my garbage.
Well, we really hope people are not doing that. We really do thank the people of Kamloops for their commitment. We really do hope people do take the opportunity to recycle those materials.
BC's residential tenancy branch has found a Vancouver property management company acted in bad faith when it tried to evict a tenant to make space for a live-in building caretaker. Now an arbitrator has canceled renter Mauricio Carvalho's 4-month notice to end tenancy. That notice was served by Plan A Real Estate Services in July. For more on this complaint, CBC's Bethany Lindsay joins us now. Bethany, why did this case end up at the RTB?
Yeah, so Carvalho lives in an 8-unit building on the west side, and he knew that his landlord wanted to evict someone to allow a caretaker to move in. That's totally legal under BC law. So Carvalho and one of his neighbors got a call from Plan A about a year ago. They say they were told one of them would have to go. The neighbor agreed to leave voluntarily. She moved out in April. But instead of moving in a caretaker, Plan A re-rented the apartment, and they raised the rent by more than 50%. Then Carvalho got his eviction notice.
It was a huge surprise and source of stress getting that eviction notice just a few months after the neighbors next door had moved out.
So Plan A says they weren't able to find a caretaker by the time the neighbor moved out, so they argue they had a responsibility to find a new tenant instead.
Bethany, what did the residential tenancy branch have to say about that argument?
Well, the arbitrator assigned to the case didn't buy it. They found that Plan A was acting in bad faith, and they said it didn't make sense to ask someone to leave when there was no caretaker available. Carvalho's neighbor had left voluntarily, so Plan A knew that she had no recourse when a caretaker didn't move in as promised. The arbitrator said it looked like Plan A was just trying to maximize its rental income, and they've now canceled Carvalho's eviction notice.
Obviously, it was a great relief. I know that the housing situation right now is extremely complicated, and I received a lot of support from friends, from neighbors, and just very grateful for all of that help.
So, of course, Plan A isn't quite so happy about this. Their executive director sent me a written statement saying the company disagrees with the arbitrator's decision and they're considering a judicial review. Plan A says they believe the decision was biased and that the arbitrator misinterpreted the law. They say they have live-in caretakers at other buildings and have never been accused of acting in bad faith. For now, Carvalho will be allowed to stay on a month-to-month basis.
CBC reporter Bethany Lindsay, thanks very much.
Thanks for having me.
Well, he left his reindeer and sleigh at home, but he brought plenty of cheer and goodwill to those who need it most. Santa Claus arrived by chopper today at BC Children's Hospital to brighten the day for patients, parents, and staff.
We're here today to spread a little bit of cheer for those kids that have to spend time in the hospital dealing with whatever illness or injury that they have. We've been to Victoria, we've been to Nanaimo, and here we are now at Children's Hospital. We've got 3 more hospitals to do today. Are you giving out high fives? All right, good job. Would you like a teddy bear?
I think what's really important to know here is children who are in hospital this time of year. I think Santa may have forgotten them, or might not know where they are. And so by Santa coming with our partners means all these children are going to have Santa come and visit with them. And this makes a big difference to reassure them that they've not been forgotten and that Christmas will happen because Santa knows exactly where they are.
Santa will never forget these kids. It doesn't matter where they are.
Santa, I have a very special family for you to meet right now.
High five. Good job. Another high five.
I can't believe that I, as an 84-year-old, ran all the way here from Ronald McDonald House just to see Santa land.
My son has been in isolation for 5 weeks, and he's actually out to be able to meet Santa today.
Merry Christmas, baby.
It means believing in magic, believing in things you can't see will happen, but they can happen. It's childhood. My son's been sick for a while, and he's felt like he's lost a bit of his childhood. So he's really excited about Santa. The amazing staff and doctors here, they saved his life, and he's also just survived a bone marrow transplant. So we're looking to a brighter future right now, so this Christmas means a lot of life for us and hope.
See you again next time. Merry Christmas. Merry Christmas. See you Christmas Eve. Merry Christmas.
Love those visits. They're important.
It's very sweet.
Yeah.
It's nice to see.
And how did you do on the weather front?
Well, not too bad today. Pretty calm across the province, except for the north coast, still seeing some rain. Tonight is probably your one chance to see the meteor showers, unless you're in the northeast. We're going to stay clear because the clouds are moving in for most of BC soon. So this is a NASA image showing last year all the different meteors that came in the peak night, which again is tomorrow night, but still a chance to see them tonight because again, this is one of the biggest meteor showers of the year. Besides the Perseids, the Geminids are one of the most spectacular show of meteors, so an exciting time to go out. Again, take a look at the Gemini constellation if you do want to see them tonight because the clouds are parting for the most part. We're still a little bit clear right now, so it's dark as it ever gets right now already in Vancouver. So, you know, go out. The one advantage of it being dark so early, you can see the meteor shower maybe before all that cloud moves in because it's sticking around right through tomorrow night. So we're not going to see or have much chance to see down here in the south the meteor shower tomorrow night because it's quite cloudy all the way through. But north of Williams Lake, better chance to see them tomorrow night. Less light pollution up there, so that should be good. Look, it's a quick teaser for what we're going to look at later this hour. You can see all that rain make its way down. Our ridge of high pressure had already broken down, so expect lots of precipitation to come down, but not last too long. We're clear again on Thursday down here in the south, just the north coast, continuing to see those showers. But again, cloudy night tonight, but not as cloudy as it will be tomorrow. So check out the meteor showers. And again, new moon. We got very lucky this year in terms of the new moon. You can see no moon. So that means no light pollution from the moon. I guess you shouldn't call that pollution, but no light from the moon means it is even easier than ever to see the meteor shower. So I'm going out tonight. You should too. Just bundle up.
You heard him, people. Get outside. Thanks, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
You might have fond memories of finding lotto tickets in your stockings as a little one, or you may include them now as a parent or guardian. But what's the best way to talk to your kids about gambling? More on this after the break. And hello to everyone watching our commercial-free live stream. Thanks for being here. Research by Canadian University students is raising worries about major storms and microplastics. Hurricanes appear to be lifting the plastics out of the oceans and spreading them to pristine regions where people may actually breathe them in without knowing it. The CBC's Kayla Hounsell has the story.
As Hurricane Larry was lashing Newfoundland in September 2021, a couple of Dalhousie University students were out collecting air. Yes, just air.
An astonishing result that we weren't really expecting.
Anna Ryan says the ocean is often thought to be the ultimate sink for microplastics. We assume they stay there. But the students set out a large glass cylinder before, during, and after the hurricane, trying to determine whether storms might be whipping up those plastics, allowing them to travel through the air to rural communities, where there is likely no other source of microplastics.
We found there were a lot of plastics, way higher than any other study has ever found before.
It's so small. How small is it?
So if you think of the width of a human hair, it's about 20 to 30 times smaller than that. Because they're so small, they're really easily ingested or inhaled.
Ryan's work has now been published in Nature, a leading science journal.
It's a really big deal. I think that really just signals the importance of the work, the novelty of the work.
Here's our experimental setup.
Another Dalhousie student is conducting similar research on post-tropical storm Fiona last year. She says she'll be able to compare to Ryan's data when the results are in.
We can't make bigger actions like policy changes nationally to cut back on plastic pollution if we don't know how bad it is at a smaller level.
Ryan says her research shows microplastics are pretty much everywhere.
And that's why everyone should care about this problem. It's not just people who live in cities or people who live in areas that are very obviously polluted.
She says the solution is limiting the use of plastics to keep them from entering the environment in the first place. Kayla Hounsell, CBC News, Halifax.
Christmas, as you likely know, is less than 2 weeks away. And the BC Lottery Corporation is now asking adults to be responsible when it comes to stocking stuffers. It's asking you not to include scratch and win tickets in any kids' stockings. The BCLC's Director of Player Health, Ryan McCarthy, joins us now with more. Ryan, first of all, why don't you want parents and guardians giving scratch and win tickets to kids?
So we know from research that kids that are exposed to gambling early in their lives, so under 19, are often more apt to demonstrate problem gambling behaviors. And so for us, the Gift Smart campaign is a way for us to encourage parents to buy fun and entertaining gifts for their children, but not scratch and win tickets.
Now when selling lotto tickets is the business of BCLC. So tell us about what efforts you put in to make sure kids don't get addicted to the things that you sell.
So we have age-gated environments. So to buy a lottery ticket in British Columbia, if you are under 25, you are automatically ID'd at one of our 3,400 retailers across the province. Or if you're trying to buy a lottery online through our secure online website, playnow.com, there is an identity verification process to make sure that you're 19 years of age or plus. So we take it very seriously in terms of making sure that youth are not able to access our products.
So we know that it is the time of year where people are giving gifts. Are you seeing more people or perhaps children becoming addicted to gambling and scratch and win tickets? Can you quantify it?
So we know from research that about 10 to 14% of youth that are exposed to gambling early, so between the ages of 9 and 11 is typically when that happens, that they are more apt to demonstrate problem gambling behaviors later on. So it might not be right away. The other thing that we know is about 4 to 6% of youth that are aged 12 to 17 are already starting to demonstrate some problem gambling behaviors. And that can be anything from playing gambling games to actually video games and sports betting. So we're just concerned in making sure that parents understand that scratch and win tickets, while they might seem harmless, they can actually be risky for youth. And so we really encourage them not to consider those as gifts for this holiday season.
Now, for those parents and guardians, if they suspect that perhaps their child may have a problem with gambling, what are the signs they ought to watch for?
So some of the things that they can look for is if they're skipping class, if they are going into debt, asking for more money. Also, if there's in-app charges that are coming through the parent's credit card, those are all signs that they might want to be aware of what's happening with their youth gambling. And have a conversation about some of the risks that can be incurred by engaging in gambling at such a young age.
And lastly, we appreciate your time. What resources specifically is BCLC offering for parents and guardians who suspect that their kids may have a problem?
So if they're concerned, I'd really encourage them to visit GameSense.com, which is our website that has a number of different resources, and including how to talk to your kids about gambling. And through the GameSense website, you're also able to reach out to one of our GameSense advisors who can also talk to parents and to kids about what safer gambling can look like.
Okay. Essentially, though, when they are of age to do that, right?
Absolutely.
Okay. Ryan McCarthy, Director of Player Health for BC Lottery Corporation. We appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Bringing back a post-war initiative to improving housing access in the future. More on what the federal government is preparing to do after this.
Even when he visits the nation's capital, Chief Chris Muniz of Niskandiga First Nation chooses to drink bottled water instead of trusting the tap.
Well, it's a trauma. It's what it's ingrained in our minds.
Niskandiga is a fly-in community in northwestern Ontario, with the longest drinking water advisory of any First Nation. 28 years and counting.
I just hope that someday that we'll be able to have clean drinking water.
Muniz also hopes Ottawa's new bill will prevent other First Nations from going through what his people are.
Hopefully that once there's a boil of water advisory, it will get addressed right away, as opposed to waiting 28 years.
Introduction of government bills.
Bill C-61 aims to protect water in First Nations by creating minimum national standards for wastewater and drinking water.
Indigenous people, Indigenous children deserve to be conceived, born, and die drinking clean water.
The proposed legislation also promises to bring First Nations water systems up to par with municipal ones.
It commits to the equity of First Nations to have sufficient funding compared to non-Indigenous communities, and the funding frameworks will be worked out with First Nations people.
Ottawa is required to introduce the bill under a multi-billion-dollar settlement providing compensation for First Nations people deprived of safe potable water.
We've needed this kind of legislation for a long time.
But the NDP's Indigenous critic isn't throwing her support behind the bill just yet.
I need to see that First Nations do feel that they've been heard. I need to see that this legislation went beyond the court case.
The proposed law replaces legislation introduced by the previous Conservative government, repealed by the Liberals after widespread criticism from First Nations over a lack of consultation and funding. Issues this new bill will also be scrutinized for as it makes its way through the House of Commons. Olivia Stefanovic, CBC News, Ottawa.
The United Nations General Assembly has voted overwhelmingly in favor of a ceasefire in the Israel-Hamas war. Canada was among the 153 nations who supported the non-binding resolution. Earlier in the day, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand issued a joint statement calling for, quote, a sustainable ceasefire. As Sasha Petrusik reports, they also called for Hamas to release Israeli hostages immediately and lay down its weapons.
It's so valuable, food aid going into Gaza these days,
goes under the protection of machine guns. So inadequate, many Palestinians only eat every few days. Their leaders now accuse Israel of weaponizing aid by blocking much of it.
They are starving because of Israel's deliberate use of starvation as a weapon of war against the people it occupied.
Israel calls the charge obscene, but it's one reason for growing international calls to stop the fighting. A massive Israeli offensive that's hammering southern Gaza from ground and air in its all-out effort to wipe out the militant group Hamas. It's drawn casualties and panic in the neighborhoods where more than 1 million displaced Palestinians now seek shelter. Missiles hit this one in Rafah. A huge explosion, she says, cement falling.
We shall now begin the voting process.
Today, as the UN General Assembly voted to demand an immediate humanitarian ceasefire, Canada officially pressed for one for the first time. Joining Australia and New Zealand, Ottawa issued a statement condemning Hamas and backing Israel, saying we support urgent international efforts towards a sustainable ceasefire.
Canada is committed to ensuring that Israelis and Palestinians get to live in peace and security within internationally recognized borders in peaceful and successful states.
Justin Trudeau says he spoke to Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who's dismissed calls for a ceasefire. He says fighting will continue with the support of Washington, Israel's biggest ally, regardless of what other countries are demanding. Sasha Petrusik, CBC News, Toronto.
The federal government is planning to revive a post-war initiative to ramp up housing construction across the country. As Kate McKenna explains, the plan to speed up the building process is for developers.
Homes like this were built across Canada for World War II veterans, a response to the biggest housing crunch the country's ever seen. Now the federal government wants to do it again.
We are living in a housing crisis, but it's not the first time Canada's been here. We are going to be moving forward with a catalog of pre-approved designs.
1950s catalogs like this one offered prefabricated options for builders, bungalows and multi-story homes, all ready to be built fast.
For a fee of $10, you could actually have access to designs that could be built quickly. In many instances, these homes were being built in a period of about 36 hours.
The federal government is launching consultations next month to make a more modern catalog. Experts say this could shave a full year off of build times.
I was pleasantly surprised and very excited. This is something that I'd been talking about for a while.
This all comes as millions of Canadians are priced out of the market and struggling to pay rent, putting political pressure on the governing Liberals.
While Canadians can't afford their rent or even dream of buying a home, now they worry they won't be able to feed their families at all.
The right kind of.
But experts say it's a complicated problem with no one solution.
It's not any kind of silver bullet to this, right? We're not just snapping our fingers and saying like, oh, look at that, we've solved everything. It's a helpful contribution, but there's some other things that have to go along.
Obviously, there's a lot of hard work still left to do to make sure that we get the implementation right, but today is a fantastic day.
Housing Minister Sean Fraser says the new catalog will include different types of builds, including multiplexes, student housing, and seniors' residences. He calls it a modern solution to the housing problem. As for when it will be ready, he says they're aiming for the end of next year. Kate McKenna, CBC News, Ottawa.
Now, if that pre-approved housing standard sounds a bit familiar, it's because we used to have that right here in Vancouver. They were called Vancouver Specials, and way back when, thousands of them were built. In this Creator Network special, Yute Lee looks at how they came to be and die.
I want to talk about this house. Well, not this specific house. There are literally thousands of these houses across the city of Vancouver. This one house, it's called the Vancouver Special, and once you notice one of them, you can't stop seeing them. There's one, there's another one, there's a group of them, a red one, a green one, a blue one. So how does a city end up with so many copies of one specific house? Well, I think the answer might offer some lessons for Canada's housing crisis. Our story begins in the 1960s. The city of Vancouver was experiencing a boom in immigration, and housing in the city was running out. People needed homes, and fast. Enter Larry Cudney, a local draftsman and a guy who apparently hated taking photos because I can't find one of him literally anywhere. He created a design for a house that would eventually become known as the Vancouver Special. It was simple and cheap to build. Its key feature, a low-pitched roof, meant you used fewer materials compared to a steeper roof. But the Vancouver Special wasn't just cheap, it also exploited a loophole, and that was because of its first floor. At the time, if you wanted to construct a house, there were rules that limited the size of your building by limiting how much square footage you could build. But the loophole? Back then, your basement was not included in that square footage calculation, and the definition of basement was a bit ambiguous. The first floor of the Vancouver Special was 18 inches below the ground, and for the city's lawmakers, that was enough to call it a basement. So the entire first floor of this house was technically off the books. This was a huge advantage. You could, of course, build a much bigger house, but also this so-called basement often ended up being used as a whole new unit of housing. You could have two separate families living under one roof. Now, at the time, this was technically illegal. The city's rules stipulated that a house could only have one family, no more. But with this basement, the Vancouver Special helped people circumvent these rules. On paper, this was a one-unit house, even though it was often a two-unit house in practice. A one-unit house on the streets and a two-unit house in the sheets. Okay. This made the Vancouver Special perfect for many aspiring homeowners. For immigrants with relatives, they could house their extended family on the first floor. For working-class residents, they could rent out that floor and use that income to pay their mortgage. For these groups, the Vancouver Special became very popular. And that leads to the final reason for why we built so many of these houses: economies of scale. As more and more Vancouver Specials were built, it became just way easier to build them. The materials became standard in the construction industry, and city staff began to recognize the design and improve it for construction more quickly. In fact, it's been reported that you could get the plans for a Vancouver Special from Larry for $65 and have it approved and built in about 3 weeks. In the middle of a housing shortage, the Vancouver Special provided affordable housing for the people who really needed it. It provided the most house for your buck, with an extra unit of housing. And it was really, really easy to build. And boy did we build them. Around 10,000 Vancouver Specials were constructed between 1965 to 1985. And while the Vancouver Special is an exceptional example, it certainly isn't alone. Most places have a specific house design that can be found all over the city. These repetitive designs exist for a simple reason. The easiest way to build a lot of housing really fast is to build the same house over and over and over again. To me, this story feels relevant right now. Many cities today find themselves with a shortage of housing, and part of the reason why is because building new housing is very difficult. Like the past, there are rules that limit how much you can build on a piece of property, often called zoning bylaws. And in many cities, most neighborhoods only allow for houses to be built in them. These are known as single-family neighborhoods, and they usually make up the majority of land in North American cities. Now, you can actually apply to build something larger than a house in a single-family neighborhood through a process called rezoning. But that's where things get a lot more complicated. Rezoning typically requires multiple applications, reports, consulting firm, council meetings, public hearings, and expertise of planning law, tons of money, and oh yeah, about 2 years. But even with all that effort, there is still no guarantee that you will even be successful. Your application could be denied. Rezoning is a slow, complicated, and risky process. Now, these rules and processes exist for a simple reason. Very few people in single-family neighborhoods want a high-rise or something more disruptive built next to their home. But the problem is that these rules end up stifling any changes to these areas. For example, the application process for this co-housing development in East Vancouver took 2 years. Not the construction, the application process. When building new housing is this difficult, the usual result is that no new housing gets built at all. But there is another side to this story that complicates things. At the height of its popularity, the Vancouver Special was perhaps the most hated piece of architecture in the city. Many complained that they were bland, ugly, devoid of architecture, and way too big. But more than anything, many felt that there were simply too many of them. And at the end of the day, the critics got their way. In the 1980s, the city officially made it illegal to build any more Vancouver Specials. But there is an interesting twist to this story. In the years following the cancellation of Vancouver Specials, a wave of public sympathy grew around these houses. They were recognized for their role in allowing immigrants and working-class people to build their own housing, despite the criticisms of architecture snobs and social elites. Today, this house is viewed as a valuable part of the city's history. In fact, it has a bit of a cult following. You can find it on t-shirts, posters, cross-stitch art, craft beers, or even consume it in gingerbread form. I think there's an important lesson here. Maybe we don't need to be so concerned about the look of new housing because, frankly, looks are just a small part of why we value things. The Vancouver Special didn't care about being the most beautiful house, it just cared about being the most useful and affordable house for the people building them. And instead of the world ending, we grew to love these houses, for reasons I'm not sure we'll fully understand. But what I do know for sure is that right now, many cities do need more housing, and they need it fast. So I can't help but wonder, maybe it's time for a new special.
We'll wait to see if Ottawa's new housing plan will include a new Vancouver Special. Yute also mentioned the Vancouver Special nostalgia items, t-shirts, craft beer, posters. If you want a Vancouver Special to grace your Christmas tree, yes, there's an ornament for that. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is on a critical mission in Washington. He's meeting with top American lawmakers, including President Joe Biden, making a hard sales pitch for ongoing support in the war against Russia. The CBC's Richard Madden has more.
Last time President Volodymyr Zelensky visited Capitol Hill, he received a hero's welcome. But this time, lawmakers were clearly in a different mood. Zelensky is facing a divided Congress, with hardline Republicans tying any new support for Ukraine with stricter security measures along America's southern border. Now, this stalemate jeopardizes President Joe Biden's $60 billion aid package to Ukraine as the war enters its second bloody year. And that's why he arranged Zelensky's visit to make the hard sell in person, underscoring how crucial it is for Congress to approve the funding. But House Speaker Mike Johnson isn't on board.
What the Biden administration seems to be asking for is billions of additional dollars with no appropriate oversight, no clear strategy to win, and none of the answers that I think the American people are owed.
So with that, the chances of Zelensky returning home with a win seems bleak for now, but hoping the White House can help bolster his case. Richard Madden, CBC News, Washington.
Down to the wire. The fight over the phase-out of fossil fuels. Why that proposal is the sticking point at COP28 in Dubai. The latest after this.
Years ago, Arthur Su Ren Cheng sketched this commemorative sculpture on paper, a piece of history that has become the focal point of what the community now calls a sacred space.
It's home to the community's Remembrance Day ceremonies. It is the site of all sorts of commemoration and activity.
For Cheng, the Chinatown Memorial Monument pays homage to the thousands of Chinese Canadians who lived and died while building the Trans-Canadian Railway system, and the hundreds who put their lives on the line during World War II. Wendy Au is a former city planner who was part of the initial project in 2003.
It's really about educating, our own Chinese young people, but also the Canadian as a whole, Canadian society, about the Chinese, sacrifice and the contributions to build this country.
But Cheng worries the meaning behind the monument may be diminished when a 9-story condo tower is built next to Memorial Square, where the structure stands.
This sculpture
This monument is already part of the legacy, part of what makes Chinatown, what makes Vancouver. This is already part of the heritage.
In June, the city approved the application from developer BD Living for a condo building on Kiefer Street under certain conditions. Community groups had argued the development would not fit within the character of the historic district.
There was no real attempt to say that's an incredibly important space.
The updated proposal will now require developers to involve the Chinatown arts community in planning the architecture of the final building, a tower the city says must complement the cultural significance of its neighbors.
Conserving the culture and heritage of Chinatown is the number one thing that we have to. This is the only Chinatown that has, a lot longer history than any other Chinatown across the country. And there's also, a hope that we're going to be, asking for a UNESCO destination down the road.
Janella Hamilton, CBC News, Vancouver.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
Tensions have been running high as the COP28 climate conference winds down in Dubai. Negotiators have been hammering out the text for the final communique. As Susan Ormiston explains, they're trying to bridge a major gap between oil producers and others who want language calling for the phasing out of fossil fuels.
It has been a long day of negotiations to arrive at a new draft text of this agreement at COP28.
What do we want? Phase out! If we don't get it, shut it down!
Meanwhile, we saw a large protest of NGOs and climate activists trying to pressure the negotiators to come to grips with this idea of fossil fuels and try to strengthen the language in that text. We also spoke to two young women who'd been in that protest. One of them, a 26-year-old from Colombia, told us about her first experience at a COP.
This whole thing is just us shouting to each other and not getting real action happening, so we can build off of that and create real solutions.
Canada's Climate Minister Stephen Guilbeault is leaving this evening to go back to Canada, but he has met with the presidency, as have the leads of all the delegations this evening. He is expecting we'll see a draft text sometime tonight or in the early hours of the morning, and that it may be the last one before a vote sometime likely on Wednesday. Minister Guilbeault was asked about the fossil fuel issue, whether that issue had been addressed, whether the controversy, disappointment, and criticism of last evening had any effect. He said it had. He hadn't seen the text, but the countries which were pushing back against any mention of fossil fuels, he said, were listening. Have a listen.
I think they listened. And the message they heard loud and clear last night from more than 70 different interventions is that what the text that was presented to us did not go far enough when it comes to sending the world a signal that we need to reduce our dependencies on fossil fuels. And there's all sorts of ways you can phrase it and you can frame it. The text didn't go far enough when it comes to finance to help the Global South fight climate change.
The process from now is that new text will be examined, looked at, pored over by the delegations, and if it is accepted or minor changes, it will go to a plenary meeting, a meeting of all the delegations here to be voted on sometime likely within the next 12 to 18 hours. Susan Ormiston, CBC News, Dubai.
Darius Madavi is back with our BC-wide full forecast. Before we get to the weather, we need to talk about wildfires.
Yes, I feel like feels like we're past it now, but Copernicus, the EU's climate change service, has come out with a report looking at just where all the emissions from wildfires this year came from. And it turns out Canada was responsible for almost a full quarter of those emissions. 23% of all the wildfires in the world were driven here in Canada. You can see here on this graph 5 times the average number of emissions from wildfires in Canada this year, and well above the previous record. And if you take a look at this globe, this map of the globe, you can see where those emissions were coming from across North America. And so as that plays, I'm just going to give you throw out a few numbers. So we saw 480 megatons of carbon dioxide equivalent emissions in Canada this year. For those who don't know what that means, myself included, because that's just a big number, 480 million tons of carbon dioxide is equivalent to about what all of Canada puts out from our emissions, our industry, all of our emissions. It's the same as all of Canada's cars emissions for over 8 years, and the same as heating every home in Canada using oil and gas for over 30 years. So we're talking massive amounts of fires, and I know that we say that fire is a natural part of the Canadian ecosystem. That is true. We need fires to keep our forests healthy, but not like this. This is what happens when you have mismanaged forests that do not get the healthy fire. We get unhealthy fire like this. That being said, let's talk about the weather. No fires happening right now across the province that we need to worry about. We do have a wind warning in place for the North Coast, Haida Gwaii, and the Central Coast down to the North Island now. That has been expanded, but should come down this evening. If you look at those winds, you can see them calming a little bit. Still strong because of that front up by the North Coast tomorrow, but improving at least. If we take a look at our big map of all the rain, you can see that ridge of high pressure breaks down. We see flurries and rain breaks into the interior. If we get rid of all the extra stuff here, you can see all that rain making its way to Vancouver tomorrow evening and pushing likely in the morning Thursday is when people will wake up and see it. But overnight, Wednesday into Thursday, we see those flurries break into the interior. In terms of accumulation, we're looking at not too much here on the South Coast. We're looking at close to 70 millimeters possible for parts of the North Coast, especially by the water, but not looking too bad overall. If we zoom in, you can see South Coast getting pretty much spared, although we should see some snow in the local mountains. And then tomorrow, we're mostly looking at that rain here not making its way down south until later in the day. And here in Vancouver, we're not likely to see it until the evening, so we should be spared most of it. But rain continues Thursday. We see a stronger system come in Friday, and then showers still possible through the weekend. So a bit of a wet forecast.
Okay, we'll survive. Thanks very much, Darius.
Thanks, Dan.
Less than 2 weeks before Christmas. Are you ready for the holidays? We're going to hit the streets to find out after this.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and here's what's in your CBC Vancouver inbox.
For 37 years, British Columbians have been donating to food banks at CBC British Columbia's Food Bank Day, raising more than $18 million for food banks in BC. December 1st kicked off the annual charity drive and continues to the end of the month. We thank you for generously donating and supporting local communities in our province. Make the season kind and donate until December 31st at cbc.ca/foodbankday.
We are in the midst of Hanukkah and less than 2 weeks away from Christmas, if you can believe it.
Many of us are making our way down our shopping lists and planning our holiday menus.
So we sent Ali Pataki down to downtown Vancouver Costco to ask people there if they're feeling ready.
So are you ready for the holidays?
Yes.
And what are you excited about?
I'm dressing up my dogs, making my house look awesome and smell awesome, and yeah, just in general, everybody's happier during the holidays, so I kind of enjoy that as well.
And is there anything stressing you out?
I don't know, not really. I mean, life is pretty good, so yeah, not really. I mean, life is not so stressful right now. We're putting it off till the next year. I'll get stressed off in 2021. 2024, pardon me. I'll be stressed out then.
So are you ready for the holidays?
Absolutely not.
Why is that?
It's still, I have to do some more shopping.
And everything's so expensive these days, right?
It's okay, what can you do? That's life, part of the life.
And what is stressing you out about the holidays?
No stress. I don't have any stress.
I work in a restaurant and sometimes can be quite busy with a lot of parties, so I think a little stress about a lot of clients coming to see us and eating with us. But besides that, it's Christmas, right? It's all good times, and I'll be family, have a good time, right?
Yeah, what are you excited about?
I'm excited about, the food. Like everybody will like food, the food, drinking, and share moments, special moments with my friends. I think that's it.
And it's your first time in Canada, right?
First time in Canada. I'm from Brazil. Like normally I'm used to the hot weather and everything like this. It's the first time I'm here, first time seeing snow and everything like that. So yeah, adapting to the situation still.
Are you ready for the holidays?
Absolutely not.
What's stressing you out about the holidays?
I guess trying to figure out what everyone wants for Christmas. Like everyone has the ability to buy everything at their fingertips online and just trying to find what will make people happy.
And it's more expensive this time of year, right?
Yes, absolutely, yes. Everything just costs so much more.
I'm going to Mexico on the 15th, so I have all my presents bought, all my presents delivered, everything's all done, so I'm ready.
Oh wow, Christmas in the heat, how's that?
I know, Christmas in the sun, that's fantastic. So it'll be nice to get away from the rain and the cold here, spend it somewhere nice.
Yeah. And is there anything stressing you out this holiday season?
No, just that I'm not in I'm not in Australia with my family, which is where I normally am, so that's the only stress.
Making sure I get the right gifts to the right people.
And what are you excited for?
The food, turkey, and all the family time.
Are you ready for the holidays?
Yes, I am.
What are you excited about?
Well, the gift giving, of course.
And is there anything about the holidays that stresses you out?
High prices of goods. That's it. That's about it. But overall, it's a nice time, of the year.
I like how people are honest. Do you have a favorite Christmas tradition?
Oh, either decorating cookies or finger food while we decorate the tree. You?
Oh, food, a beverage or two, nap, and then we just repeat that.
Just one or two?
What? Okay. That's all for us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6.
You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, our free app, as well as on YouTube and on our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And we will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. See you then.